Hi. I don't know why it's been so difficult to share my story on social media. Um, I keep trying to start and then I hold back. But I've had a handful of friends over the last few years encourage me to share my story, actually, to write my story. But I just really don't know where to start. Um, but I thought it might be easier to just share through vlogging. Um, so here I go. I'm going to just start um, being as open as possible. I don't have a script, I'm not writing notes, so I am just speaking freely. But I think I'll start um, with what uh, started 4 years ago in February, um, that led to a very dark time in my life, um, that ended in a very dark time in my life. One of the most stressful, um, most depressing, um, very dark period that I wasn't sure if I was going to survive it. And it's just only in the last few months have I really been um, coming to terms with things and finding peace, as best as I can. So I'm going to go back up to February 2022. Actually, I'll go back to December of 2021. Um, my kids and I and their dad lived in Illinois at the time. We are from Florida, so we often traveled to Florida for holidays and summers to see relatives, grandparents, and we always stay with my mother-in-law for a couple of reasons. One, there was more space, and two, it was cleaner, and it was a safer environment for my children. But in December 2021, I noticed a huge change in my mother's mobility. She was having a very difficult time walking, but she was still more concerned about being there for her son than spending more time with us during the time that we were visiting. We live 1,000 miles apart. Her son and his broad were local. But that was, normal for us. So anyway, I did take note of my mother's physical condition. Her mobility was very poor. She also just seemed not really lethargic, but not really clear mentally. Um, but then in February 2022, it was my birthday, and the kids and I went out for my birthday, and we came back home, and um, it was actually kind of hit or miss whether or not they would call me on my birthday. Most of the time they did, I think, just out of courtesy, and I would get a card. Um, and they didn't really do much for me, for my birthday or Christmas, because their son was way more needy than I was. And I'm pretty independent. But anyway, that's beside the point. And so, anyway, I kind of made a comment about, well, I guess my mother's not going to call me on my birthday. Well, my daughter ended up texting my mother, and she got a response back that mother had just been in hospital a few days prior, and then Poppy, who my kids called my mother's husband at that time, they no longer do now, but um, he had been in the hospital too. So I was like, what in the world? So I called mother and I was like, what is going on? She's, well, I didn't want to bother you. You have a family and blah, blah, blah. Um, anyway, I was like, well, I am your daughter. I mean, you could at least let me know what's going on. And so she had been in the hospital the week prior for a few days, um, because she developed cellulitis and needed IV antibiotics. And that was like her second bout within a few months. So then a few days after that, I believe it was a day or two before my birthday, her husband had been in a really bad accident. And he was in the hospital for a couple nights. He had fractured his rib. I think he fractured his nose. I think he had a huge gash above his eye. Um, so, um, I talked to him for a few moments. I believe he had just gotten out of the hospital that day, actually. And so then the following month, um, her husband and I talked, and it turns out that this accident, he was found at fault, and um, he had to go to court. And so he went to court, and he had to pay a huge fine, and he had his license suspended, and he had to take a 12-hour safe driving course. So when he told my mother about it, she apparently was a little confused. She either couldn't or wouldn't help him take the course online, and the closest in-person course was going to be probably close to an hour away, considering traffic in that area has grown so much. It's just north of Tampa. So, um, so I told him, I said, well, when I saw Mother in December, I was really concerned about the change in her condition, and that maybe I come down there and I'll help him take the course online. He has zero tech skills. I think about the only thing he knows how to do is turn on the computer, but he does not know how to use a computer. He doesn't know how to text. He knows how to operate the TV, and that's pretty much it, and the phone, of course. So he was open to that. And so I drove down there in May. And in the meantime, he was counting on Mother to get him places, and he was complaining about her driving. Well, she's never really been, the best driver anyway. And and prior to me driving down there, he had told me the story about how my mother got lost. Um, it was probably March, month or so after my birthday, after his accident. She had gone out to her son's home, son and his broad, and it was about a 35-40 minute drive at that time from where she lived. And so when she left their home, um, and she got on the interstate, she missed her exit apparently, and somehow ended up in downtown Tampa. So she calls her husband to let him know that she had missed the exit and she was in downtown Tampa. She's going to get back on the interstate. Now, she missed the exit to where they live, but there's lots more exits between where they live and downtown Tampa. But yeah, so she gets back on the interstate, and it sounds like she started heading south again. Now, to give my mother some credit, she's always been kind of directionally challenged. So you tell her to go south, she'll go north. Um, so anyway, she ended up, it was like over an hour later, and her husband's like, well, what the hell? Where is she? It turns out that it's what it sounds like. She kept going south and went over the Sunshine Skyway, which is part of 275. And the Sunshine Skyway Bridge connects Pinellas County and St. Pete to Sarasota Bradenton area. And so she started heading north on I-75 and made her way back home eventually. That was a little concerning when I heard about that. But again, I just, chalked it up to her being directionally challenged. But to miss that many exits between home and downtown Tampa when she first called her husband, let him know that she had missed, her exit. She'll be home soon. Um, so anyway, so I drove down there in May of 2022, and I helped her husband take his safe driving course online. I sat with him next to him with my laptop, and he watched the modules and read the modules, and he would answer the questions, and I would input his answers for him. And so we finished that within 4 days. And let me tell you, when they say 12 hours, they mean 12 hours. If you try to skip ahead because you're doing it more quickly, they will start you right back to the beginning. So yeah, when you say you take a 15-minute break or a 30-minute break, whatever, you have to take that break. There is a counter on that safe driving course. So so he finished the course, but throughout those 4 days I spent with him, I got to see a different side of him that I didn't really see before. I grew up very, very intimidated by him, fearful of him. And even as an adult, I still had fear inside. I always braced for, am I going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? And then, he'll turn against me. Yeah. So, but I saw a different side to him. I saw, wow, he's kind of a smart guy, and he is a eighth grade dropout. He's illiterate, but I saw a different side to him, and I started liking that side of him, and I started letting my guard down a little bit. We talked about some of the stuff that was going on with mother and some of my concerns, and he started finding stuff in her file cabinet of evidence that she had been supporting their son and bailing him out of all kinds of trouble over the years that her husband didn't even know about. I knew there was a lot going on. I confronted my mother many times over the years, and she would always deny supporting her son. And I always told her, "Don't lie to me, because I know what the truth is." And I'd always shut her up. But so anyway, he started being more open with me, and started feeling honored. I was like, wow, this is a father-daughter relationship that I've never had. I felt like he was trusting me for help, and he was learning the extent of what mother had done for their son behind his back. And he didn't know what all was going on, because my mother, up until then, she was handling everything online, but then she was forgetting passwords and stuff, so she wasn't spending any time on the computer taking care of things. A lot of their bills actually were auto pay, so that wasn't really a concern there. So I told him what I knew, and I told him, while I'm here down there, we should probably look into getting your affairs in order, because they are older. And I had always suspected that my mother was planning on leaving all of her stuff to her son, which was fine. I don't need her stuff or her money or any of that. I've worked for everything that I've owned and accomplished. But her son, he's just always been needy. I'll just have to talk about that more later, but he's always depended on the goodness of others to help him get by in life. So I was really surprised that he was open to that. And so we went to an attorney, and they had their wills done, they had living will done, the surrogate health care done, everything. And so everything was set that, surprise, surprise, I'm going to get 50% of the estate after they're both gone. Well, that's no longer the case. So that was May. He finished the course, and we sent in his fee, the proof of completion of the course, and then he had to wait to find out whether or not he would definitely get his license back, which he did, I believe, in July that year. But unfortunately, his insurance rates went up because of the accident, because he was found at fault. Well, I called the insurance company during this time because uh, to try to get a better rate. Actually, I take that back. That didn't happen until October of that year. So anyway, I left there after a couple of weeks, feeling better about their situation. Um, oh, and they had added me to their bank account so that I can access it to monitor it to make sure that their son wasn't taking more money he should. But I didn't really monitor it because I wanted to give them their privacy. I checked on it every now and then, but because mother was still, she hadn't been, deemed incompetent or anything, so she could make decisions too. And so that was May. In September, um, he called me, and between May and September, he would call me, every few days or so, let me know how things are going with mother. I talked to mother and encourage her to do exercises, physical and mental exercises, to help her keep her mind going active, and even her body, even though she was in so much pain. And while I was there in May too, she also had an orthopedic appointment, and I told her I'd like to go with her because I could see how much difficulty she was having walking. Well, she must have forgotten because she went to the appointment without me. And when I found out, I didn't know which doctor it was. So I did track down where she went, and I met her there. And by the time I got there, she had already left her appointment. She was coming out of the building, having to use a wheelchair for support. And that broke my heart. I'm like, wow, she is really struggling. So I told her that I wanted her to follow me because we're going to get her a rollator, which is the rolling walker that has a seat on it. That I think that she needed that to help her with her mobility. So she did. She followed me to Walgreens, and we got her a rollator, and then she followed me back to their home. And so when I left to go back home to Illinois, and then her husband and I talk every few days. And then in September, on her birthday, I called her, wish her happy birthday. The next day, her husband called me. He was irate. I mean, he was livid. So apparently, while he was away from their home, their son showed up asking mother for money. And so she wrote him a check. And the carbon copy of the check, her husband had found it. And so I said, well, let me call the bank and see if it's being cashed yet. Sure enough, it was already cashed. And so Marvin called his son and kind of told him off. So at that point, he was so irate that he wanted Ken. He wanted him out of everything, out of the will, everything. So I said, well, we called the attorney, and I called the attorney, and she recommended that a phone call be made to the state for elder exploitation. So this is part one. I'm going to do this in several parts.